She invited my ex to her wedding, but banned my wife. So I burned the bridge. I never imagined the day would come when I'd be forced to choose between my family and my marriage. But when my sister sent out her wedding invitations, I realized this wasn't just about a party. It was about erasure. She had no problem inviting my ex-girlfriend, someone I haven't spoken to in years, but she deliberately left out my wife, the woman I've chosen to spend my life with. In that moment, the message was loud and clear. My love wasn't real enough for her big day. So I made a choice. And once you draw a line in the sand, there's no going back. I always thought that the wounds that hurt the most weren't the ones that bled. No, the deepest cuts are often quiet. They come with calm voices and smiling faces, hidden behind layers of family tradition and polite gestures. I learned that lesson the day my sister's wedding invitation arrived. It was a warm Thursday afternoon in early March when I opened the envelope. My wife, Ngach, was standing in the kitchen, humming to herself while prepping dinner. I smiled when I saw the gold foil lettering. My younger sister always had a flair for elegance. I opened it expecting to see both our names. After all, Ngach and I had been married for 4 years. We had built a life together, stood side by side at family gatherings, holidays and reunions. She was family, at least in my heart. But the envelope only had one name. Mine, I read the invitation twice. Then a third time, hoping I had missed something, I even looked at the envelope again, as if Ngach's name might appear like invisible ink, once exposed to disbelief. "Hey babe," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You want to come take a look at this?" Ngach walked over, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She leaned in her dark eyes, scanning the invitation. She paused, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm not invited," I said nothing. I didn't have to. The silence spoke for itself. For a moment, we just stood there, two women married in love, but somehow still not enough. Later that night, I called. She picked up after a couple rings. Her voice, chipper. "Hey sis, did you get the invitation I did?" I said, "but why isn't Ngach invited?" There was a long pause. Then the answer came light but sharp. "I just want my wedding to be as peaceful as possible," she said. "And honestly, Lynn, I don't feel comfortable having Ngach there." My breath caught, why I asked. "She's never been anything but respectful to you, I know." I said quickly, almost too quickly. "It's not like there's one big thing, it's just the energy. You know, there's always tension. I don't want that on my big day." I sat down on the edge of the bed. "There's been tension because you've never really accepted her." I sighed. "Look, I'm setting boundaries. I have a right to invite who I want to." "My wedding." "Yes," I said quietly, "but you're excluding my wife." "That's not a boundary, that's a statement." She didn't answer. "I thought you were okay with us. You came to the wedding. You stood in the photos. I was being supportive," she said. "But that doesn't mean I have to be best friends with her." "No one asked you to be," I replied, my voice starting to crack. "But you're choosing to invite me and not her. Do you realize how hurtful that is?" "She'll be fine," Mai said, and for the first time her voice felt cold. She probably didn't want to come anyway. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Ngach had gone to bed. I stared at the invitation, running my fingers over the edges, like it could somehow change. If I touched it long enough, Ngach never once asked me to pick sides. She never gave ultimatums, never made it a her or me situation. But in this moment, I realized something. Mai had made that choice for me, and it wasn't just that Ngach wasn't invited, it was who was. A week later, I found out from a mutual friend that my ex Trung had received her invitation. Trung and I had dated for 4 years. We broke up 6 years ago amicably, but we hadn't spoken since. Mai had always stayed friendly with her, which I found strange, but never really confronted. I didn't want to make it a thing. Now, it was a thing. Trung was invited, Ngach was not. It was a betrayal wrapped in silk ribbon. I called Mai again. This time, I didn't start with greetings. "You invited Trung," I said. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "We're still friends. You're inviting my ex to your wedding, but not my wife." There was a pause. "It's not personal. It's the most personal thing you could do. She's fun, Lynn, and she knows a lot of people coming. Ngok doesn't really fit in." I closed my eyes. "She doesn't have to fit in. She's my wife. I'm sorry if you feel hurt." Mai said, her tone clipped. "But this is my day. I need to do what feels right for me." And that was it. The conversation ended there, not with a scream, not with tears, just silence. But that silence echoed louder than any argument I told my parents. They sighed, both of them trying to play peacekeepers. Don't make it a bigger deal than it is. My mom said, "It's just one day," my dad added. "Go show your face. Keep the peace. You know how families are." But that was the problem. I did know. Families are supposed to love you unconditionally. They're supposed to show up for you and your spouse. They're supposed to honor the people you choose to build your life with. My family wasn't doing that, and the more they told me to keep the peace, the more I realized that they didn't care about peace. They cared about appearances. They cared about pretending everything was fine while quietly cutting away the parts of me they didn't want to see. I looked at Ngach that night, truly looked at her. She was reading on the couch, her glasses slipping down her nose, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She didn't ask what I was going to do. She didn't have to. I walked over, sat beside her, and took her hand. "I'm not going," I said. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "If they can't respect who you are to me, then they don't get to celebrate with me either." Ngach blinked, and I saw tears gather in her eyes, though she didn't let them fall. Instead, she leaned her head against my shoulder. For the first time in days, I felt at peace. But that peace came at a cost, and I knew the drama was only beginning. The morning after I made my decision, I expected backlash, but not how quickly or how viciously it came. My parents called first. "Lynn, are you really not going?" My mother asked, her voice laced with anxiety. I took a breath. "I'm not going." "Mom, and I'm not sending a gift either." She gasped, like I had said something obscene. "But it's your sister's wedding." "And Ngach is my wife," I replied. "She's not invited, that's a problem." My father's voice came through the phone next. "You can't let this one thing ruin your relationship with your sister." "It's not one thing," I said. "It's a reflection of how she sees my marriage, of how you all see it." A pause. "You're being dramatic," my father said at last. "You're making it about you." I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back, but it was already too late. That evening, the group chat with our extended family exploded. Mai had clearly told her side first. I was painted as selfish, as the sister trying to sabotage a wedding out of spite. A cousin messaged privately to ask what was going on. I told her. She never replied. Even Mai's fiancé, Dan, a man I had only met a few times, sent me a message that read, "This is really disappointing. We hoped you could put things aside for one day. One day where my wife had to sit at home ignored and erased. One day where I had to smile through betrayal, pretend that everything was okay. While my past was welcomed and my present discarded, I couldn't do it." Ngach said nothing through all of it. She cooked dinner. She folded laundry. She watered the plants. But I saw it in her eyes, the quiet guilt, like she was the reason things were falling apart. "You're not the problem," I told her one night. "They are." She nodded but didn't believe it. "I never wanted you to choose," she whispered. "You didn't," I said. "Mai did." We decided to leave town the weekend of the wedding. A quiet coastal getaway. No phones, no internet, no family. Just us. But drama has a way of finding you. As we checked into a small resort on Saturday morning, I glanced at my phone one last time. Dozens of messages. One from my, "I hope you're happy." Another from my mom, "You broke your sister's heart." A picture of the wedding party followed. Everyone smiling, clinking glasses. And there near the center was Trang, my ex, laughing her arm around my... Like family, I felt a chill even in the warm beach air. But then Ngach reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold but steady. "They made their choice," I said, and I made mine. Ngach didn't reply. She just pulled me closer and we walked toward the ocean. I knew the next time I faced my family, something would be different. Something would be gone. The days after the wedding were eerily quiet. There were no phone calls, no texts, no invitations to lunch, or vague peacekeeping attempts. My family went silent, and in that silence, I heard everything. I heard their disapproval, their disappointment, their quiet agreement with Mai's decision. I tried not to let it consume me. Ngach and I went back to our routines. We returned to work. We went on walks. We cooked new recipes and watched old movies. But there was a distance between me and the world now, a line drawn, not in ink, but in loyalty. A week passed. Then two. One afternoon, as I scrolled through social media, I saw an album, Mai and Dan's Magical Day. The pictures were beautiful. Mai looked radiant. Dan beamed with pride, and there was Trang, again in multiple shots, smiling, hugging family members, giving a toast. I closed the app. My stomach churned. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't heartbreak. It was a realization I didn't belong there anymore. A few days later, I received a long email from my mom. No subject line. It read like a script of regret and redirection. You know we love you, but family means sometimes compromising. Maybe my went too far, but couldn't you have looked past it for one day? You hurt her, you hurt us. We just want things to go back to how they were. I stared at the screen, back to how they were, where Nagaksh was always the tolerated guest, where my marriage was viewed as an exception, not a reality, where I had to soften every truth so no one felt uncomfortable. No, I couldn't go back. I wrote a short reply. I love you, but if accepting my wife is optional, then your version of family isn't one I can return to. I hit send. Ngach came home that night with takeout and 2 slices of matcha cake. She saw the look on my face and didn't ask questions. She simply handed me the chopsticks, sat down beside me, and turned on our favorite show. We ate quietly. After dinner, I leaned against her. Do you think I made the right choice? She took a moment, then nodded. You chose us, that's never wrong. Her words settled into me like rain into dry earth. We didn't win anything. We weren't vindicated, but we were whole. In a world that told us to shrink, to bend, to apologize for simply existing together, we stayed upright, and that mattered. Months passed. Birthdays came and went. Holidays passed without invitations. But new traditions bloomed: quiet mornings, homemade dinners, spontaneous road trips. We built a life without the weight of forced acceptance. Eventually, I sent a short message. Hope you're doing well. I replied, we are. That was it. No reconciliation, no grand apology. Just the echo of a bond that had once been strong, and the silent understanding that some distances can't be crossed again. But I had no regrets, because in choosing to protect the love I built, I had finally chosen myself, and that was the loudest statement of all.